Hello, hello again, my friends. The other day, I was listening to Glennon Doyle's podcast, We Can Do Hard Things, and she was interviewing a woman by the name of Alua Arthur, and she is a death doula. And if you're like me, you might not know exactly what that is, but if you had to guess, you're probably right. You know, much like a labor and delivery doula who helps women during the very heavy, very difficult, but beautiful undertaking of giving birth, death doula is someone who helps people during the very heavy, very difficult, but beautiful undertaking of crossing over, of dying. And the goal, no matter what type of doula you are, is to give people the most satisfying experience you can. And I guess it's less common in death because we don't think of death as being something that could ever be considered satisfying. But after listening to Alua, the more I thought about it, the more I realized what a beautiful gift she provides. You know, death is so unknown, it's so feared, but also a very meaningful and definite part of our lives, a moment that all of us will experience. To me, it makes perfect sense, especially if you don't have the support from loved ones, or if you just want to help remove some of the stress from your loved ones. They provide, logistical support and make sure your needs and wishes are carried out to the best of their ability. And they help emotionally as well. They support you as the person going through the really scary experience, but they also support your loved ones. It's a beautiful, touching gift to give yourself and others. And you might be wondering, why the heck am I talking about a death doula on a podcast about binge eating? And besides the fact that I think it's a beautiful thing to take advantage of and more people should know about it, Alua also said something so significant on the podcast, but they didn't really spend much time talking about it. So I kind of needed to close the loop for them because it was this pretty substantial notion. And Alua said, since she's been a death doula and spends her life with people nearing the end of theirs, she's learned how to discern what really matters in life, as you'd guess. And during her interview, she said something along the lines of, I gained weight because, I learned that doesn't matter at all. And then she just kept talking like she didn't just drop this truth bomb full of wisdom and value. Now, I don't know her experience with diet culture or body image. I don't know what her relationship with food was like before, but I can tell you that it's healed now. And while I don't know if I want to be a death doula and spend my life helping people cross over, frankly, I don't know if I'm strong enough, I envy her perspective. Her perspective is such a gift in her life and for those she shares her perspective with. So some of us might hear this story and think, yeah, she gets to have this perspective because of her circumstances. She's a death doula, and because of that, she's thinking about the meaning of life a lot because of her surroundings. She's able to see the big picture. She's able to lay down the heavy burden of diet culture because she views life in a more expansive way. But, I don't have time for that. I don't live in that world. I live in the normal world. I'm stressed about a promotion I really want but don't feel good enough for. I'm struggling with my toddler's sleep schedule. I've got a beach vacation planned and I'm dreading it because I don't want anyone to see my body. I'm in a relationship that feels over, but I just can't let myself believe it. I'm just worried my life will fall apart if it does. I think about, it's kind of like I'll think about big life stuff, the deep stuff when I'm older, because right now I'm just struggling to feel okay. I'm just struggling to make it through each day. Once I get this circumstance, the promotion, the sleep schedule, the beach vacation, the relationship problems, once I get that figured out, then I will be able to focus on the big picture in life. Our circumstances, whatever circumstances we're experiencing in this moment, feel like they set our perspective. It feels like we're at the mercy of them. We believe that we have perspective because of the certain experiences we've had or have not had, and there's nothing we can kind of do about it. Now, having particular experiences certainly makes it easier to think certain thoughts. That's true. The death doula has a very expansive perspective. Her viewpoint is more zoomed out. She doesn't sweat the small stuff like weight gain or body size or body shape because she spends her days thinking about the meaning of life, thinking about death, thinking about life after death, big things. Her surroundings do make it easier to have that expansive perspective. But what I want to offer you today is that you don't need to have certain experiences to have a certain perspective. Your circumstances don't cause your belief systems. You get to choose your belief systems. I know this because two people who go through this same exact circumstance can take on very different perspectives as a result. You get to choose your perspective. It's beautiful. It's a life-giving truth. There are many circumstances in my life that I used to say shaped my perspective, but now I know it's because of my thoughts about these circumstances that I had this perspective. The circumstances in our lives can sometimes open up a new thought or belief that we might not have given access to opening up on our own. But ultimately, that belief is coming from our brains, which is actually a very empowering idea. We don't have to wait on experiences to open up our minds to new perspectives. We get to do that on our own if we choose to. And, I do want to affirm something that's you've probably experienced. Left unmanaged, our brains will naturally gravitate toward a negative perspective. They do this not because they're jerks, but because they're evolving. Our lower brains are our oldest part of our brain. They existed in our primal days where survival was our biggest concern. Our lower brains care about seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, belonging to a group, and conserving energy. They only want to keep us alive. That's it. Safe and living. So having a negative perspective, like assuming the worst, catastrophizing, is a survival strategy our brains developed to keep us from, eating the poisonous berries. Our lower brains don't care which berries taste good. What's important to them is which ones are deadly. So we will seek them out so that we can avoid them. We'll be on alert. We will repeat known behaviors, even if we don't like those behaviors, because those known behaviors won't kill us. Clearly, because we're still alive. What I'm trying to say is that generally having a negative perspective is our natural tendency, and it's there to keep us alive. But we're not primal beings anymore. We're not running from tigers and foraging for berries. Staying alive is a lot easier now than it was millions of years ago. Our upper brains, and this is a very simplified explanation of our brains, I'm well aware. Our upper brains are the most evolved parts of our brains. They're here to help us in our modern world. So we can leverage our upper brains to choose our perspective, but it does take practice. It takes repetition. It takes effort. If your brain resists that idea with thoughts like I mentioned before, thoughts like, hey, I'm just trying to get by, I can't possibly be asked to put in more effort, I want to remind you that you can keep that perspective if you want to. I'm not here to tell you what to believe, but I'm going to guess that that perspective isn't serving you, is it? Now, I do want to state that I'm not talking about silver linings. I'm not recommending that toxic positivity bullcrap. I do not think everything happens for a reason. Ugh, literally makes me want to gag. Because the only thing that these viewpoints do is shame us when we experience real, painful emotions. Those perspectives suggest that negative feelings are bad and you should just be able to think your way out of them and never have to feel them. It's just, they're not good. It's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that you open your brain up to a perspective that serves your life. Not because you're running from pain, but because doing so makes you feel loved and valued, because you want to honor this gift of life by expanding it as much as you can while you're lucky enough to have it. I'm suggesting that you don't wait for a particular circumstance to expand your viewpoint. You are capable enough, you are competent enough to do that work right now. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, though. It's awkward. It's jarring, actually. It's what my clients undergo when they first sign up to my program. It's like a paradigm shift. We're opening up our minds to another perspective, another way that goes against the dominant narrative. It goes against what we've always believed. It goes against diet culture. It says not only should we not follow diet culture's rules, but actually we need to actively violate its rules. It says the thing we were told to do that is the most virtuous thing, which is restrict, and then shame and hate and judge ourselves, is actually the thing that is causing us to binge. And the only way to heal our relationship with food is to do the exact opposite, to allow, and then follow that up with self-compassion, curiosity, and kindness. It's so incredibly damaging that we grew up swimming in diet culture. We grew up in a culture that teaches women that thinness is morally superior. We grew up in a heteronormative culture that teaches us that finding a romantic partner is the most important part of life, and men do not want fat women. We're implicitly and sometimes explicitly told that we will never be happy unless we're thin. We were told that fat is the one bad thing we could ever be. My previous perspective about food and weight was so painful. I obsessed about food and weight so much of my life, but I just thought I had to until I figured it all out. I thought everyone else seems to have figured out this problem except for me, so I just have to keep focusing on it until I figure it out. Deep down, my perspective, and it's hard to admit, was that thinness was the most important thing, the most important quality about myself. My thoughts, my feelings, my actions were only valid if I was thin. Like nothing mattered until I was thin. And I was so stuck in that perspective. It felt so true. Anything that deviated from that felt wrong. It felt like an excuse. It felt like failure. I thought the only way out of my misery was losing weight. I wish so badly I could go back to past me and give her a big hug and tell her that none of that matters at all. I wish I could tell her how impressive she is exactly as she is. I wish I could give her the perspective that I have now. What a different life she would have. What a different childhood. What a different view of relationships she'd have. If you're stuck right now in a perspective that hurts you, but you feel absolutely trapped in, I invite you to open your mind up to the possibility of another one, a bigger one. We can all have a big picture perspective, like the death doula. We can have a big picture perspective right now, in the midst of a life that doesn't overtly force us to think about the bigger picture. You don't need to be a death doula, nor do you have to have a life that feels settled or balanced, where you feel like everything is tackled so you can just open up to a new perspective. In fact, a big picture perspective might be just the thing you need to help with the tackling. A big picture perspective is what takes you out of the weeds that seem to be growing higher and higher. It lifts you out, giving you full view of the garden, which is not to say that there aren't weeds, because there are weeds. But the weeds aren't as vast and towering as they seem when you're dwelling amongst them. A big picture perspective shows you the full depiction. It's a more accurate representation of what is real and what is true. And what is real and true is that you are enough right now. You don't have to do more. You don't have to weigh less. You don't have to have more friends. You don't have to be more successful to be enough. You might think that that type of perspective, where you accept that you're enough right now, will keep you complacent and maybe stunt your potential for growth. But actually, the exact opposite is true. When you have a big picture perspective of what truly matters in life, that it's not your dress size, it's not how you look in a swimsuit, you open up to a bigger life. Those things start to feel so trivial because in the big picture, they are. I'm not saying we need to spend time every day thinking about what it's going to be like on our deathbed, but I do think it can be helpful from time to time. It can help shift your perspective back to the highest vantage point when you find yourself not being able to see out of the weeds. If your current perspective is telling you that you're not enough, but you have to establish this impossible thing or goal in order to be just on the same level as everyone else, that perspective is not helping you expand and grow. It's digging you into a deep hole, one that blinds you from what's really true and what's really possible for you. Having a big picture perspective doesn't take away pain and suffering of life, but it puts it into the correct angle. When you can zoom out and do something I call thinking with your soul, you're able to see more, to know more, to believe more about what's possible. And from that vantage point, you can live a bigger, more expansive, more true life. If you're done with your current perspective that keeps you small and your problems large, you should sign up for my 12-week End Secret Binging program. In the program, we learn about our perspectives, our beliefs that hold us back without our consent, and we do the work to recalibrate our perspective, to reconnect with ourselves and our inner wisdom instead of subscribing to the beliefs of diet culture, beliefs that keep us stuck and small. So sign up for a free consult call at sammybcoaching.com. That's SAMMYBEE coaching.com. I look forward to chatting with you. See you next week.